Hello everyone. Microservices will be the topic of our today's discussion. First, we will discuss the things that you need to decide before working on any of the microservice architecture. After that, we will discuss few of the best practices. And finally, I will tell you how to maintain the code of microservice architecture on repository. As you know, in monolithic architecture, all the modules are developed and deployed as same application. All the component of the application is a part of single unit. However, in microservice architecture, all the modules are developed as independent application and can be developed in different programming language. Let me tell you a few of the things that you need to decide before working on any of the microservice architecture. First, how will microservice communicate with each other? As we know, in microservice architecture, we have different applications. So the question is how these applications will communicate with each other. For this, we have three methods. First is HTTP. This works on hypertext transfer protocol. Here we send requests like get, post, put, delete. Next is RPC. This works on remote procedure protocol. Here we set up the procedure that can be called remotely among microservices. Third is message broker. Here we set up the message broker among all the microservices. Suppose microservice A wants to send message to microservice B, so it will send first to message broker and message broker will send it to microservice B. Message broker use queue data structure to record and send the messages. Next, you need to decide request and response format. For this, we have two methods, XML and JSON. XML use tags similar to HTML. However, JSON derives from JavaScript. JSON is more popular than XML. Next, you need to focus on network latency. Because your requests travel from among different microservices, so latency plays a very important role. There are two methods that make direct impact on the network latency, synchronous and asynchronous. In synchronous method, when you send a request, you have to wait for the response. However, in asynchronous method, you don't need to wait for the response. Now it depends how many receivers you have. If you have more than one receivers, you should go with asynchronous method. Now let's talk about few of the best practices. First, break down the features. You need to break down the application features based on the business requirements, not on the basis of technical requirements. For example, if you are developing e-commerce website, your components would be product management, order management, cart management, checkout management, and payment management, and so on. Next rule is follow single responsibility. Each microservice should be responsible to perform single task. You should not have microservice that is responsible for product management and then payment management. Next is follow loose coupling. Each microservice should be developed, deployed, and scaled independently. If you want to make change in any of the microservice, you should have liberty to do so. Next is selection of the programming language. You should have full freedom to select the programming language for your microservice based on their requirement. Next is maintain versioning. You need to maintain strict versioning for each of the microservice. You should know which version number has been gone on production server for which microservice. You need to decide the rerouting and deprecation rules. Next is use events. You need to use events for the communication among microservices. Next is use API gateway. You need to use API gateway for request. Let API gateway set up the rules for authentication and authorization for your microservice. You should not write this rule for each of the microservice. Now let's talk about how to maintain the code on repository. As you know, in microservice architecture, we have different applications. So the question is how to maintain the code of these applications on repository. Because in monolithic, you have single code base. So we have two methods, monorepo and polyrepo. Let's talk about monorepo first. In monorepo, we maintain single repository and have the code of all applications in this repository. So the question is how to maintain the code of all applications in one repository. The most common approach for this is by maintaining folders. We create different folders for each application. It has some benefits and drawbacks. The major benefit is it makes the code development and management easy because you need to manage and clone the single repository. Also, it makes the access of common files easy by putting them into the root directory. However, it has some drawbacks, like when you have the single repository for all the applications, developers start to write the tightly coupled code. So we lose the major property of microservice architecture. On the other side, it makes the code management and maintenance slower. For this, we have second method, that is polyrepo. In this approach, we maintain independent repository for each application. So the code is completely isolated. Now you may ask how to manage these much repository in polyrepo approach. So if you go with GitLab, you can use the group feature. You can create the group and have all the repositories in that. If you go with Bitbucket, you can create the projects and have all the repositories in that project. So all the methods have their benefits and drawbacks. But in my opinion, if you have the smaller project with few of the web services, you should go with monorepo. Otherwise, you can use polyrepo. Now I think you have clear idea what are the things that you need to decide before working on any of the microservice architecture and the best practices and how to maintain the code. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Until then, stay tuned.